Welcome to Staying in My Lane podcast. We are back and I'm going to do it a little bit different today. We were going to continue our conversation about schools, functional medicine, what we are feeding our children, and how we are affecting them as adults who may be dysregulated. But it's been a really heavy few weeks, and I'm sure all of you know where I'm going with this. I was going to wait for my husband to join me to talk about Charlie Kirk and what he stood for. However, this week has made me realize how cruel people can be. But let me say this, there should never be a time where we are celebrating somebody passing away or dying. The past week has really taken a toll on my mental health. I'm angry. I've grieved somebody that I've never met. If you know me really well, you know that my beliefs and morals and values and my religion align very much so similar to what Charlie Kirk stood for. And today's episode is one I think every single one of us needs to sit with, because it's not just about politics or religion. It's about something that's deeper than that. It's about who we are when no one's watching. Who are we when life gets hard? Who are we when the world pressures us to bend and compromise our values and morals, or tells us that we should stay silent? This episode is about truth, integrity, standing firm in what you believe, even when it costs you something. Even when it costs you something. That's all I'm going to say. We live in a world where truth has become negotiable. Integrity is often sacrificed for convenience, and values are treated as flexible depending on what's trending. But in order to live meaningful lives, genuine and authentic lives with substance, and leave an impact, then we have to be willing to do the hard thing, which is speak the truth, keep our integrity rooted, and stand firm in our beliefs. I mentioned that our values and beliefs can change with trends. Well, not mine, but people's values and beliefs can change with the trend of social media or what's trending in the world. On the surface, values and beliefs are supposed to be the foundation of who we are, the things that we stand for no matter what. But when you look around long enough, you'll notice that what people believe to be right, true, or even moral often is shifting and changing with the times. Why is that? Is it growth, compromise, pressure, or is it simply the human nature feeling of wanting to belong? Values are the things that we claim to hold to be important. Honesty, freedom, kindness, loyalty, justice. Beliefs are the ideas that we accept as true about the world, people, and ourselves. Neither of these are formed in isolation. These are formed by our upbringing, influenced by our cultures, social circles, and more than ever, media and trends. And, if you grew up in the 1950s, you probably held very different values and beliefs about family, gender, or even work than somebody who grew up in the 2000s. It doesn't necessarily mean that something is wrong with one or the other. It just means that social climate and trends of the time has shaped how people thought about the world. When we think about trending, things that are in social media, trends are powerful. They create that momentum. They tell us what's popular, what's acceptable. For example, think about attitudes towards mental health. For decades, mental health struggles were something to be hidden, shamed, or dismissed. Fast forward to now, therapy, self-care, and open conversations about anxiety or depression are not only accepted, but they're encouraged. However, there's a massive shift in values, largely because cultural trends made it acceptable to speak up. That also goes similarly for social issues, technology use, or even how we define success. What was once considered rebellious might now be considered, quote, normal. What was once normal might now be considered harmful. And so, when we think about values and beliefs, why are they changing so drastically with the world that we live in? Things like human desire to belong, we want to fit into a certain group, be accepted, exposure to new ideas, technology, social media. They've made it almost impossible to live in a bubble. I try to live in a bubble, but it's really hard to. But the more perspectives that we encounter, the more that it causes us to rethink the things that we once believed in. However, the danger of this is when we are constantly swayed by trends with our beliefs or our values, we risk losing that foundation. But if you don't even have a foundation, it's going to be really hard to not be swayed or influenced. If what we believe changes every time the culture wind blows, then what do we really believe in? Or are we just adapting to avoid discomfort? Or are we trying to fit in with a certain group because we're afraid of being, rejected? There's a difference between growth and instability. Growth is when you thoughtfully change your beliefs to adopt stronger ones. Whereas instability is when you simply trade one set of values for another because it's what is in the right now, or it's what's trending in social media or in your, social circle, whatever. And this is why people often talk about the importance of timeless principles. Things like honesty, integrity, love, respect, and justice, values that often outlast fads, politics, and social waves. I want you to imagine something for a moment. Picture yourself standing in a crowded room. Hundreds of voices speaking all at one time, competing for your attention. Some voices are loud and demanding, others are soft and persuasive, but almost all of them are telling you what to believe, how to think, what to value, and who to be. That's the world that we live in today. Our world is full of noise, pressure, constantly asking you to bend or, shift your beliefs just a little bit, to compromise your values and integrity, silence your truth, and to step away from that integrity for the sake of fitting in or being accepted, or even avoiding conflict. Because as we've seen recently, the world that we live in right now is costing us our lives when we disagree with someone, and it should never come to that. But what happens when you refuse? What happens when you decide that the truth actually matters, integrity actually matters, and your values are not for sale? Let's start with the truth. The word truth gets thrown around a lot. Truth isn't just an opinion, it's not a feeling, it's a reality. Truth is what remains, whether or not people believe it, whether or not it's popular, whether or not it's convenient. Think about gravity. You can't deny it, you can't ignore it. But if you step off a building, reality doesn't change. That's the nature of truth. Truth often makes people uncomfortable. It exposes lies, disrupts illusions, shines light into shadows. People would rather keep that hidden, which means when you decide to speak the truth, you will encounter resistance. The reality is that if we compromise truth, everything else crumbles. Gandhi once said, "Truth never damages a cause that is just." That means if you stand for what is right, truth will never weaken it. It will only make it stronger. And I can kind of feel you guys maybe being able to see where I'm going with this, is that what Charlie stood for, it's only making it stronger. So the foundation, the truth is foundation, and foundation sets the tone for the truth. But truth alone is not enough. Truth without integrity is fragile. So let's kind of move into that integrity piece. We've talked about integrity in this podcast before. Integrity is my most important value in my life. I will not compromise my integrity for anything. If something is wrong and I feel it's wrong, I'm not going to do it. Integrity is one of those words people love to use, but few actually live out. I'm sure we can think of people in our own communities who may have been in a public figure position to where they preach this integrity. They say they have integrity, but they don't, because they live a double life. They do things behind closed doors. For example, you can't be a director, a CEO, a chief of, police, fire, whatever it may be, a judge, attorney, doctor, mayor, whoever it may be, and, deal drugs or cheat on your spouse or, participate in illegal activities and then say that you have integrity to the community that you serve. And integrity means your words and actions align, meaning that you are the same person in private as you are in public. And when you're not the same person as you are in private as you are in public, doing things that are morally, ethically, or criminally wrong behind closed doors, that is not integrity. In fact, the word integrity comes from the same root as integer, which means whole, complete, undivided. To live with integrity means there's no gap between what you say and what you do, no split between your public face and your private life. Think about how much distrust exists in our culture today. politicians who say one thing on a campaign trail and do another behind closed doors, people who are running for office but committing criminal acts behind closed doors, leaders who preach values they don't practice, celebrities who build brands on authenticity while secretly living double lives or not even using their own brand, modern medicine doctors who are in that field but choose to go to a holistic or functional route, teachers who homeschool their own children. We see hypocrisy everywhere. We see lies everywhere. We've almost become numb to it. But the challenge is, are we holding ourselves to a different standard? I want you guys to think about that for a second. Are you holding yourself to a higher standard? Integrity shows up in small choices. It's returning the extra change when a cashier gives you too much, keeping a promise even when it's inconvenient, being faithful to your spouse when no one else would know otherwise, refusing to cheat even if the temptation is there, or even if it means that you lose. I once heard someone describe integrity like this: integrity is doing the right thing even when the wrong thing would benefit you more. And that was so powerful, but it's also very hard because integrity will often cost you. It may cost you money, relationships, opportunities, or comfort, or even a job. But here's the paradox. When you live without integrity, the cost is far greater because you lose not only all of that, but you lose yourself. And since last time I did a couple questions, Q&As for the listeners, I have one for you today. Are there places in your life where your integrity is cracked? Where your words don't match your actions? Where your private life doesn't align with the values that you proclaim to have? I try really hard to not judge people, but I also have a lot of information and knowledge of things that happen. And because of that, when I see people, wherever it may be, whatever setting it may be, and I know that their private life doesn't align with their values that they proclaim publicly, I will automatically distance myself from them because that also compromises my integrity. And this is not about guilt, it's about honesty, because you can't fix what you won't face. And until you commit to living with integrity, truth in your life, you will never have that power in yourself. And part of having integrity is also being able to surround yourself or distance yourself, whatever it may be, from the people who have integrity or don't have integrity. Integrity is not flashy. You won't get applause for it. You'll often probably be lonely, but over time it builds that foundation so no storm can shake you. And that leads us into the next pillar. And because truth and integrity must be anchored in something solid, we need to discuss why values matter. Think of values like the compass that guides you through your life. They're the things that hold you non-negotiable. These are the things that help you decide, this I will do, this I will not. Without those clear values, you drift. You're tossed around by the trends, peer pressure, circumstances, and without those boundaries to hold those values in place, it's almost like drowning. If you think about values like the anchor of a ship without an anchor might look fine when the sea is calm. However, the moment that a storm comes in, that ship is dragged wherever the wind blows and it has no stability. Culture will always try to redefine your values for you. One decade, something is wrong. The next, it's celebrated. One year, you're told to chase success at all costs. The next year, it's all about self-care. If you don't have your own set of deeply rooted values, expectations, and boundaries, you'll always be adapting, shifting, and compromising yourself. When you define your values clearly, life becomes simpler. Not easier, but simpler. Decisions that once felt complicated now have clarity, because if something violates that value, don't do it. Period. And that also kind of ties into integrity. This doesn't mean that you'll never have to face conflict. In fact, standing firm in your values will almost always invite conflict into your life. But it also means that you'll have peace and you won't be at war with yourself over things that feel wrong. Now, we need to be really real about something. Standing for truth, living with integrity, and holding firm to your values will not make your life easier. In fact, it will make your life often harder. If you stand for honesty in a dishonest workplace, you might lose your job. If you stand for purity in a culture that profits from exploitation, you might be mocked. If you stand for faith in a secular environment, you might be labeled as ignorant. If you stand for compassion in a world addicted to cruelty, people might take advantage of you. There's always a cost. Always. But the thing is that every compromise also has a cost. When you lie to protect yourself, you chip away at that trust with not only yourself, but with the world around you. When you abandon your values to please others, you lose self-respect. When you silence the truth to avoid conflict, you lose your voice. Overall, it's kind of like losing that compass that we talked about. One of my favorite quotes is, "If you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything." I used to be really easy to fall for things. But as I've aged, I'm only 34, but as I've gotten older, I realized that standing for nothing will cost you everything. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is choosing to act even though you're afraid. And when you anchor yourself in that truth, integrity, and having those values, you become the kind of person who cannot be bought, silenced, or moved. I want you to take a moment and ask yourself, am I actually living by my values? Or is it only when it's convenient? Because I see people, and I've been guilty of it. I'm not anymore, but I've been guilty of it before, who, when we're, out in a group setting, they may be portraying one thing behind closed doors, but in that group setting, that peer pressure is really easy to give into. But I want to say that values that don't shape behavior, they're just a decoration. So take this moment and think about, what are the hills I'm willing to die on? What values would I never trade, no matter the cost? Because sooner or later, you will be tested on them. And sooner or later, you're going to have to stand firm if you want to create a life where it's purposeful, meaningful, and you're going to make progress. The truth matters, but let's be honest, truth spoken without grace can wound. It can become a weapon instead of a light. Some people pride themselves on being brutally honest, but that honesty that is brutal often destroys rather than heals. And so the goal isn't to be brutal, it's to be truthful and meaningful and loving. And I'm not saying you have to be loving to every person you come across, but you have to have that compassion and grace to be able to talk to someone without being brutal or aggressive. For example, think about when you correct a child. Do you scream at them to prove a point, or do you guide them with firmness and love? That same principle applies to relationships and society as well. I'm trying to be better about this myself. And a helpful filter that I use is, before I speak, I ask, is this true? Is it kind? Is it necessary? If it passes all three, then I will speak. If not, maybe silence is just wiser at this point. Make no mistake, speaking truth with grace still takes courage, because grace doesn't mean that, or it doesn't guarantee that people will receive it well. Some will still resist you. Some will attack you. Some will argue with you to create that conflict. But when you speak truth without hatred, without arrogance, you keep your soul intact. And we've seen that with Charlie Kirk. Sometimes the truth that you speak with grace will still set someone free. He's changed lives of millions of people all over the world. We've seen it this week. And we live in a world where image often matters more than integrity. And that's where we look at someone like Charlie or his wife Erica, and they have that integrity over image. Social media has trained us to curate appearances, project perfection, showcase only the parts of ourselves that look good. However, when we do that, there's a deep danger in that, because when we invest more in appearance than character, we rot from the inside out. It doesn't matter how beautiful you are on the outside. If you don't have the character to match that on the inside, it's not going to matter. Guarding your integrity in today's world means setting boundaries. It means asking, am I the same person offline as I am online? Do my posts on social media reflect my values or just my image? Do I chase more likes than I chase truth? It also means surrounding yourself with people who hold you accountable. Integrity rarely survives in isolation. We need people in our lives who can call us out when we drift, remind us who we are when we forget, and be there to help us when we are trying to better who we are. And finally, it means being willing to walk away from environments that erode your integrity. Your job, friend group, even your habits that constantly tempt you to compromise, maybe it's time to step away. And I can speak from experience with a job that I recently had left, compromised my integrity, compromised my morals, my values. And I decided to guard my integrity like it's a treasure, because it is. And I was not willing to compromise my beliefs and my integrity for a job, even if it was paying my bills at the time. So let's zoom out for a second. Integrity and truth are not just about you. They're about the legacy that you leave. Think about the people who've influenced you most in life. Chances are it wasn't their wealth, their fame, or their talent that shaped you. It was their consistency, their faithfulness, their truth, and their integrity. That's also the kind of legacy that you can leave, but you have to be willing to sacrifice in order to get to the highest form of yourself. When you live by truth, integrity, and have those values that don't just shape you in your own life, they shape your children, your friends, your community, your coworkers. You actually model a way of living that outlasts you. Our actions and what we do has a far greater impact than what we say and the words that come out of our mouth. People may forget your words, but they'll never forget your example. And obviously, none of us are perfect. We all fall short somewhere. We all have moments where we compromise truth, where our integrity cracks, or when we drift from our values. But the question isn't whether you'll fail. The question is, what will you do after you fail? See, the key here is humility. Owning your mistakes, asking for forgiveness, making things right. Integrity is not perfection. It's about that honesty. When you stumble, not giving up, realigning, recommitting, starting over, because every step back into truth aligns you, strengthens you. Every choice that you make to restore that integrity rebuilds that trust. Failure doesn't disqualify you, it actually refines you. So here we are. This is not a long episode by any means. Usually it's longer than this, but when we look at the legacy of Charlie Kirk, whether we agreed with him or not, whether we saw eye to eye on his values or not, one lesson becomes clear. Conviction matters. He was a man who chose to stand firmly in what he believed, often at a great cost to himself. And, in a world where it's easier to stay silent, to blend in, to avoid criticism, to run with the crowd, Charlie reminded us that often leadership means stepping into conflict, not away from it. His legacy challenges us to ask ourselves, what do we stand for? What are we willing to face opposition to defend it? But beyond his convictions, Charlie also demonstrated the power of influence. He built platforms, he gathered people, he sparked conversations that reached across generations, countries, states, everywhere. To agree or disagree, his ability to mobilize others teaches us that one voice can ripple outward into a movement. It's a reminder that we're all shaping culture in some way, whether it's in our homes, communities, or on a broader stage. The question his legacy leaves us with is, how are we using our voice to divide, to build, to challenge, or to inspire? Finally, Charlie's life offers a sobering reminder about the weight of responsibility that comes with influence. Every platform, every audience, every set of followers comes with the need for wisdom and humility. His story challenges us to not only hold strong convictions, but also integrity in how we live them out. Because at the end of the day, legacies are not built on only what we said, but on how we lived, the way we treated others, and the courage that we showed. Whether we align with his message or not, Charlie Kirk leaves us with this truth. What we believe shapes the world that we leave behind. Some of you may be asking, why does this matter so much? Why do we spend this much time talking about truth, integrity, and values? Why are you bringing up Charlie Kirk? Because this stuff matters, you guys. This is the stuff of life. This is the foundation. Without truth, without integrity, everything collapses. Without integrity, without truth, nothing lasts. Without values, life becomes shallow and fragile. But when you live with that truth, when you hold that integrity, when you stand firm in what you believe, stand firm in those values, You become unshakable. You become someone that others can trust, someone who brings stability into unstable times. You don't have to be famous. You don't have to be powerful or rich to change the world. You just have to be consistent, truthful, whole, and stand firm where everyone else runs. As we bring this conversation to a close, I want to remind you of the journey that we've taken together today. We've talked about truth, about how truth is not just an opinion or a perspective, but reality itself. We've talked about integrity, the wholeness that comes with words, values, and your actions when they all align. And when we talked about the values, those anchors that keep you grounded in a world where everything is shifting like the sand. Now, here's the reality. Choosing to live this way will not make your life easier. In fact, in many ways, it will make it harder. Speaking truth will often cost you. Living with integrity will cost you. Standing firm in your values will cost you. You might lose opportunities, friendships, relationships, reputation. But what you will gain is something far more valuable. Peace of mind, peace of soul, the kind of peace that lets you sleep at night knowing you didn't sell out. The kind of peace that comes from knowing that when people look at you, they don't see performance, they see the real you. And let me tell you something, the world is desperate for people like that. People who are consistent, people who are steady, people who cannot be bought, cannot be swayed, and who will not be silenced. People who are willing to stand when everyone else bows. When you live like that, you become more than just another voice in the noise. You become a signal, a lighthouse, a presence that others can look to when they're lost in the fog. And something I want to leave you with is this is not just about you. Your truth-telling, your integrity, your values, they ripple outward. Again, our children are watching. I've said that in a couple other episodes. Our friends are watching. People who you work with are watching. And even people who you'll never meet may be impacted by your choice to stand firm. Let's not settle for being people who blend in. Let's not settle for people who only speak up when it's safe. Let's not settle for people who value comfort over conviction. Instead, let's be people who live in truth, by truth, people whose integrity is unshakable. Let's be people whose values guide us like a compass through the storms of life. As I leave you with this episode today, I challenge you to choose one area of your life, just one, where you can take a stand. Maybe it's being honest in a situation where it would be easier to stay silent. Maybe it's repairing a crack in your integrity. Maybe it's refusing to compromise a value even when it costs you something. Because that change doesn't happen all at once. It happens by choice by choice, day by day, decision by decision. So stand firm, speak your truth. The world needs you to. When we really think about it, this isn't about politics. It's not about the left versus the right. This is about good versus evil. And we all need to be doing our part, giving our best selves and working on our healing and contributing to the world. Going to be left with whatever we teach them. So we need to teach them the best that we can. So with that being said, I will see you later.